Hi. Well, how you guys doing? How are you doing? Okay, good. So my name's Tim. Welcome to Blackhawk. This is your first time. This has been coming a long time, whatever. We're stoked that you guys are here in the summertime. As we do kind of summer life rhythms around here, there are a few changes that happen. One of them is our evening services change just a little bit. The 4:30 service that we normally do throughout the year, we shut down for the summertime just due to attendance, a lot of students gone, and this kind of thing. So no 4:30 services starting next week. Everything else about the other services, 9, 10:45, 6 p.m., that all stays the same. Buses, childcare, everything. But just no 4:30 service. So, one thing also is, if you've noticed, we have traffic issues here on Sunday morning. So maybe if you've been coming to Blackhawk for a while, one thing we might want to throw in your hat to think about is to think about coming in the evening. I mean, after all, Sunday's a weekend, and sleeping in is pretty great. And there are evening services, and seats that we open up on Sunday mornings are seats for guests to come, and we know that people do come when we make room in the morning. So something to think about, at least for coming in the evenings as well. One other shift that we do through the summer, a key thing that's going on Sundays is actually all the action going on underneath our feet right now with Planet Kid downstairs, and especially early childhood ministries and elementary school ministries and so on. We give these volunteers who just do awesome stuff with the kids all year round during the school year, we give them a break for the summers. And so summer kind of programming and teaching and playing and doing all this stuff with the kids downstairs, we kind of try and get a fresh batch of just summer volunteers. It's short term, just for the summer. And basically, we're short in a huge way for summer staff. And so we hope we don't have to cut things or minimize what goes on down there. And so, if you've ever had any interest, or you think, hey, I like doing hand motions, and like this kind of thing, you like hanging out with kids, then think about signing up. If you look in your bulletin, there's like a top 10 reasons to hang out with kids on Sundays, and or your connection card or something like this. But they definitely need some help for the summer. So cool. Let's see. I think that's that. Oh yes, one other piece. Discovering Blackhawk. Who's been discovering Blackhawk here? It happens in the evenings. So this is an evening kind of little forum that Chris and Nancy, another leader here at our church, do. And it's basically, if you've been coming for a little while and you're kind of interested in learning more about the church, this is basically an hour-long forum discussion, kind of give you a cosmic map of who we are as a church community, what we're up to. It's a time to ask questions and find out more about kind of our mission and identity as a church. So that's tonight at 7:15, if that's something you might want to come back for later today. Sound good? All right, great. Summertime, yes. One of my favorite things growing up in the summer, I had a lot of kids on my street. Grew up, and there were just kids all up and down our street and on our block. And we had kind of common backyards. A lot of them were fenced, but we would all fences are immaterial when you're a kid, right? So you're all over everyone's backyards. And one of the favorite things that we would do in the summers is we would break up into teams for like the whole afternoon or evening, and we would have full-scale dirt clod wars. You guys ever played Dirt Clod Wars before? No? It's very primal. It's kids break into teams, and you run around throwing dirt at each other. That's basically the premise of the whole thing. Now, to become skilled in the art of dirt clod warfare, you need to know the tools of your trade. There are different kinds of dirt clods, at least two. There's one basic distinction that you need to understand here, and I'll show you two types of dirt clods here. The kind of dirt clod that you see up here in the image on your left is very, very different than the one on the right. Can you see the difference? You should be able to see it if you've... Okay, what's it? Well, the one on the left it's soft, right? It's full of moisture. That's why the soil's dark. And these are the best because when they hit someone, they explode. And it stings a little bit, but it's, they're moist, so it leaves a mess on you, and it's kind of like, oh, you got me, or whatever, that kind of thing. So these are good. The ones on the right, however, what's this one all about? Right? It's been baked by the sun. It's hard. This is like throwing a rock at someone, right? So it might break, but it will like break in half or something like this, and it hurts. It hurts when you get hit with one of these. So I got these out of the farm field by the parking lot about 2 days ago, so I'm not sure what their status is now. They might be hard. I won't throw it at you. So I remember one dirt clod war in particular. I was on a team with a guy named Nathaniel Weichel, and he had like 12 brothers and sisters. He lived down the street. And there was a kid across the street who was on the opposing team. His name is George Parnell. And, we were in someone's backyard, having dirt clod war. And Nathaniel hastily picked up a dirt clod, from the backyard. And before he examined it, it left his hands, headed towards George Parnell. You can see where the story's going, of course. And you can guess what kind of dirt clod it was. It was not the soft kind. It was the hard, like a rock kind. And this dirt clod went straight towards George Parnell's forehead. And it just hit him square right here in the forehead. And, you can imagine just the scene. George was yelling. He was hurt. It broke the skin of his forehead. And, this poor kid, so he's on the ground, he's like yelling, and, he's covering his wound like this. It's bleeding, but it's filled with dirt. It's a dirt clod, for goodness sake, you know what I mean? So he's got this dirty, and it's like creating mud, from the blood and so on. It's just this bloody, messy goo. Is this a funny story? I can't tell. So, you didn't think it was funny. I don't know if he watches podcasts or whatever. Maybe. Sorry. I was on the opposing team, George. So, we walked him home, and it was just this huge bloody mess. This is week 2 of our series on forgiveness, week 2 of 4. And when somebody wrongs you, when someone betrays us, when somebody lies about us and spreads gossip behind our backs, when someone betrays our trust or cheats us or does something kind of sketchy at work to get the upper hand on us, it's messy. It's never a clean cut. It's like getting a dirt clod right in your forehead, and the wound that results is not simple. Right? It's this dirty mess, this wound in our lives when people wrong us. It may be like major things that people do to us. Maybe it's the subtle, everyday criticism, never encouraging words of a spouse or a coworker or something. But the wounds that result in our lives, it's a lot like getting a dirt clod right in the face. What's the way forward when someone lobs their dirt at you? Is there a way to a place where the anger that results like right after you find out or right after it happens, is there a way for that anger to find some kind of resolution or a place where it doesn't rule us anymore? Is there a way to a place where the bitterness and the resentment that tends to build up, where that doesn't eat away at us anymore? Is it possible to find a place where there's actual healing, where we're able to move on with our lives and not let it rule us anymore? That's what we're exploring in this series. And as a community of followers of Jesus, it's our conviction that the gospel of God's grace means that, yes, there is a way forward, but it doesn't mean it's easy. Jesus calls his followers to this long journey of forgiveness when people throw their dirt at us. And this is not a marginal issue, This is pretty central to like the whole Christian story. So Chris last week kind of prefaced this with a key passage from the crucial moment in the story of the gospel, the story of Jesus' crucifixion. It's from Luke chapter 23. Let's read it again. When they came to the place called the Skull, there the Romans, they crucified Jesus, along with the criminals, one on his right the other on his left. Jesus, the Jewish prophet who's been accused, even though he's innocent, who's being sentenced to death, though he's done nothing wrong, he ought to, at this point, be calling down curses on these Roman soldiers. But instead, he offers forgiveness. He says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they are doing. And as he utters these words, they've stripped him naked and are dividing up his clothes by casting lots. At the center moment of the Christian story is an act of forgiveness. At the story of the cross, where God is forgiving humanity, Jesus is right there forgiving. This is not a marginal issue for what it means to be a Christ follower. This is like at the center of the story. Jesus calls his followers to be the forgiveness people. If only it were as simple as it is to say something like that, right? So we're not naive here, you know? This is a big room. And there's a lot of people watching on video and in those rooms. And there are a lot of stories that could be told here today. A lot of stories of pain, of ways that people have thrown their dirt at you. There's a lot of wounds here. And we recognize that we're stirring up the pot by camping out here for a month. I don't know your story, probably. But it's our conviction as a community of Christ followers that God's grace has the power to take even the most broken humans and bring healing and bring life. Amen? That's why we dedicated this whole issue of Illuminate. This is our kind of free quarterly magazine. You can pick it up free out at the info booth. Every story in here is a story of forgiveness. It's just people here in our church community whose stories seemed impossible. But by God's grace and by forgiveness, they found a way forward somehow. This is not a marginal issue. This is central to what it means to being a follower of Jesus. You may feel like this is impossible. You may feel like this is so far off from you. But I would just plead with you to be open this week and over the next couple weeks to what God might do in your story. I find that as I just kind of meet people and get older, and I'm kind of new at this pastor thing, you know, but as I kind of go forward, I meet a lot of people who have stories of dirt clods thrown in their faces. And I find one of the most common things, common reasons people have skepticism or resistance about that forgiveness could actually work or have some kind of healing effect in my story. One of the most common reasons is misunderstandings of what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is actually a pretty unclear and muddy concept, I think, for many, many of us. And when we hear Jesus teaching about forgiveness, many of us assume that we know what he means when he says that word. And I'm not sure that we do. One of the most important things we can do is at least say, what are we talking about when we say Christ followers, the forgiveness people? What does that actually mean? What does it look like? And that's what we're kind of exploring here today. What forgiveness is, but also, perhaps even more importantly, what forgiveness is not. Let me show you an example of what I mean. Why don't you grab a Bible and turn with me to the Gospel of Matthew. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 18. Which, if you're using brown Bibles here, Matthew 18 is on page 695. 695. Matthew 18. This is kind of a well-known little story. We're going to be in verse 21. A well-known little exchange here between Jesus and his most well-known Peter, man. This guy gets a bad rap, but he said a lot of stupid things in the gospel, so there you go. He's about to say another one. Verse 21, Peter. Then Peter, he came to Jesus and he asked, Lord, how many times should I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to I'm feeling generous today. 7 times? Okay, now, a couple things. When he says brother, he does not mean his sibling. Brother, Jesus, he was a traveling teacher and prophet. And so he would go into different towns and he would stay there for a little while. He would announce his message and kind of form little groups of followers in all the towns in Galilee he went to. So we're little groups of 12 or so, 24 people, right? And these were little communities of Jesus followers, and they referred to each other with family language. They became new little families. So brother refers to another Christ follower. So we're talking about within the community of Christ follower here. How many times, Jesus, should I forgive another Christ follower when they sin against me? Up to 7 times? And Jesus answered, not so much, not 7. How about, let me think here, 77 times. Okay, now we read this just offhand, or often if we just read these few sentences here without reading like the rest of Matthew 18 like we're going to do, it's easy to totally misunderstand what Jesus is saying here. It's easy to think that he's saying essentially, you want to be my follower, it means you need to go into Pier 1 Airports and go lay down in the doormat section, right? So you want to follow me? You could be a doormat. Be a doormat. Let people walk right over you. That you just take it again and again and again. You're a Christ follower, you take it again and again and again. It's not about numbers, Peter. You just take it. You forgive over and if you're in this situation and you know they're going to do it again, you just take it again and again. It's easy to walk away from this little scene and think that that's what Jesus is saying. This would be a drastic misunderstanding of Jesus' vision of forgiveness. It's a total distortion. If you look at the whole of Matthew 18, this whole chapter, Jesus is giving wisdom to a group of Christ followers here. If you're doing life together as a community of Jesus, how do you get on as a group of people together? That's what the whole of Matthew 18 is about. And obviously, issues of conflict and resolution are going to come up because as humans, as people together. You got to read the whole chapter. So what we're going to do is highlight in this chapter a couple other parts of the chapter where Jesus unpacks what he does not mean by forgiveness. Again, I find one of the most common reasons we have hesitancy to think that forgiveness is possible in my story because we misunderstand what he means. So here's what I'm going to do. If you pull out your message notes, I've got everything that's about to be on the screen is in your message notes. If you don't have one, be sure to grab one if you think you'll find it useful on your way out the door. They're in the bulletins. One of the most important things we can do is clarify what forgiveness is not, what Jesus does not mean by forgiveness. And we'll kind of work through this and we'll go back to Matthew 18 so you can know I'm not just making all of this up. If you look at the whole of Jesus' teachings, and here I'm kind of going off of a brilliant, powerful little paperback by a guy named Lewis Smedes, a professor of ethics and theology. He was a pastor as well. If you're looking for something on forgiveness, I could not recommend a little book more highly. The Art of Forgiving by Lewis Smedes, like a little $10 paperback. I'm kind of working off of his stuff here. Forgiveness is not. We have a lot of misapprehensions, misunderstandings about forgiveness. Forgiveness, we're going to see according to Jesus, is not ignoring or forgetting. It's not condoning or excusing. Many of us think that if we forgive when someone lobs their dirt clod at us, if we forgive, we're like subtly enabling this person to do it again. Or we're subtly, at least by our actions, condoning what they've done. We think forgiveness speaks the language of I don't mind and it doesn't matter, which of course isn't true because you do mind and it does matter, right? Jesus' idea of forgiveness is precisely the opposite of ignoring and forgetting. It's the opposite of excusing what someone's done. Jesus' vision of forgiveness is moving towards the issue and actually naming what has been done wrong. It's precisely because something has been done wrong that it needs to be drawn attention to and it needs to be forgiven. It is not forgetting. I don't know how it's... Okay, forgive and forget. It's a great bumper sticker, but man, keep it on the bumper for real. I mean, just how is that even possible to forget? It's not about forgetting. It's about moving towards the issue. We're going to see this here in Matthew 18. Forgiveness is not about tolerating or allowing further abuse. We misread the 77 times business here. Forgive 77 times. We think Jesus is saying, like, don't set up any boundaries, or don't distance yourself from the person. Just like set yourself up again, and if you know you're likely to be hurt again, we'll do it anyway because you're a Christ follower, you're doormat, remember? And so it's exactly not what he's saying, just not at all. We'll read this here in Matthew 18. It's not about tolerating abuse. Let me just pause right here. There's a lot of stories in this room. If you're in a situation of abuse from a parent or from a spouse, man, your first priority is not to forgive. Your first priority is to get safe. Get out of that situation. Forgiveness is something that happens once there's distance, and you got to deal with your heart towards this person now. Forgiveness is not tolerating. Forgiveness is not the same thing. This is really important. Forgiveness is not the same thing as reconciliation or restoration of relationship. It doesn't mean that things automatically go back to the way they were. Reconciliation is two people, right? There's been a rift. Somebody does a wrong. Somebody is wronged. Reconciliation takes two people. The person who does the wrong needs to admit what they've done. The person wronged needs to find a way to forgive. Reconciliation is the long process of the healing of that relationship, of steps towards trust being rebuilt over time. Reconciliation takes two. Forgiveness takes one. Because forgiveness is something about our hearts towards the person who wrongs us. So we often think that forgiveness hinges on the other person changing. No, reconciliation hinges on the other person changing. Forgiveness is about something changing inside of us towards the other person. It doesn't mean you're going to be buddy-buddy again. In some case, that would be the most foolish thing you could possibly do, is to walk into that relationship again. Forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean that the offender escapes the consequences of their decision. And here things get really messy. This is where, we need to have another person involved, likely. It takes wisdom to know how the consequences should play out for what this person has done. Okay, let me show you what I mean. Go back to Matthew 18 with me. Go up to verse 15 of Matthew chapter 18 here. Jesus is, again, he's talking about conflict resolution here in the community of his followers. He says, if your brother, who's your brother? This is fellow Christ followers, male or female here, right? If your brother, if another Christ follower sins against you, go. Show him his fault, just between the two of you. If he listens to you, you have won your brother over. Okay, first bit of wisdom here. Somebody wrongs you. Okay, don't go make a Facebook fan page or something like this. I hate so-and-so, right? To see how many people will join. You might get a lot of people, but it's probably not the best thing to do. It's not really. No, you face the issue. You move towards the issue. And you have wisdom here. Okay? It may not be possible to go to the person. It may not be wise yet to go to the person. You need discernment, but you face the issue. And you do it within a small circle. This is not about the gossip chain. You move right towards it. What if that doesn't work? If he doesn't listen, verse 16, take one, maybe two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. Think about what's happening here. If this person won't recognize what they've done, if they won't own up to the dirt clod that they've thrown at you, you need distance. You need some sort of separation. You need a third party who can come in and kind of speak wisdom or have insight, spot things that you can't see, that they can't see. You need help is what you need. Okay, we often think if somebody wrongs me, first go to Facebook page, right? And then go start a personal hate club or something like this. It's maybe one other person. This is about distance. And once you're distant, then we begin to deal with this situation here. What if that doesn't work? Verse 17. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. Okay. Now we're liable to misread this in a huge way. Who's Jesus' audience here? What's the church? First of all, is the church a building ever? No. Okay. What's the church? Thank you. That's a prompt response. Okay. It's people. The church is people. This is a crowd. Who's Jesus talking to? He's talking to a church. A church is a small group of Christ followers whose lives are intertwined together. Something more akin to what we might have as a life group here. That's what Jesus has in mind. You expand the circle, one, maybe two people. Expand the circle again to people who are directly involved in relationship in this circle here. There's another layer of safety and distance. And if this person still won't own up to what they've done, treat him as you would a pagan and a tax collector. You gotta love the Bible here. Okay. Okay. Now, pagan, English. Good word, bad word? It's a bad word. Okay, in Greek and in Aramaic, it's not a bad word. It's a descriptive word, meaning a non-Jewish person. That's all it means. Jesus is Jewish. He's talking to Jewish people. Treat him as you would a non-Jewish person or a tax collector, by which Jesus means, like, be a total jerk, right? How did Jesus treat non-Jewish and tax collectors? How did Jesus treat these people? He moved towards them. He called them to follow him. This is a person who says they're a Christ follower. They're not following Christ. So you move towards them. They're not a Christ follower. They're not following Jesus. You call them to follow Jesus, to own up to what you've done in this situation. Okay, now there's a whole lot we could unpack from this passage here. But could you walk away? Okay, now the charge about forgive 77 times is like right in the next paragraphs, a few paragraphs after this. Can Jesus possibly mean by forgive 77 times, can he possibly mean ignore, minimize, forget, or condone? Can he possibly mean that? Is there any ignoring going on here? No, just the opposite. You move towards the issue. Is there any tolerating going on here? Is Jesus advising that we step right back into the situation so we can be wronged again and again and again? Absolutely not. Does it involve letting the offender escape the consequences of their decisions? No, it doesn't necessarily mean that. You need a group of people around you to have wisdom to know what to do. So do you see this here? This is Jesus' vision of forgiveness. You move towards the issue. So if we can see what forgiveness is not for Jesus, what is it then? Again, kind of working off of the work of Smedes here, but we'll see here in Matthew 18. Forgiveness is, as Chris was unpacking last week, this is what all of last week was about, forgiveness begins when we give up our right to revenge, to retaliate, to get even. Revenge has a way of creating more devastation than there was to begin with. At first there was one wrong, then there's two. And then that person might wrong you back again, having three, or maybe they might take it out on a third party, and then it begins to escalate. So where does it stop? Forgiveness is about a heart change. Something happens inside of us. How we regard the person who throws their dirt at us. There's nothing about what Jesus is saying is that you ignore, condone, or minimize. We saw this right here. You move towards the issue. You move towards it. You name it for what it is. Now again, that may mean going to the person themselves. That may not be a wise thing to do. You need wisdom and the counsel of others around you to help you know what to do in that situation. It might not be possible. They might not be alive anymore. But whatever it means we move towards the issue. We don't ignore it. We don't forget it. And if you're there, right, look, these are already huge steps. If you make it there, it gets to our hearts, something inside of us. It's about recognizing the humanity of this person who's wronged me. They're a broken human. and they're acting out of their brokenness towards us. They've made a mistake. They've failed in a big way. We're not excusing what someone does to us when we acknowledge the fact that they're a failed or a broken human. We're calling it what it is. So we have a tendency when someone wrongs us to kind of boil all of their complex humanity down to the very thing they did to us. You know what I mean? So someone lies to me, and then in my mind, as I mull it over and over again, the lie becomes, well, that's because they're a liar. They were probably born with a forked tongue. You know what I mean? We do this to people. Humans are more complex than that. And as a Christ follower, it's making this move as we recognize the brokenness of someone who wrongs me. It flips right back the other way, because the cross, coming to the cross means recognizing that I've got brokenness inside of me too. It may not be to the same degree as the person who wrongs me. It may be broken. I may be broken in different areas, but I make mistakes. I'm broken. I know what it's like to act selfishly. We're not excusing what people do to us. We're calling attention to the human situation. We're a bunch of broken people going around throwing dirt at each other. That's what we are. And that does something in our hearts. And if we can get to that kind of place, then all of a sudden, here we are, we're facing a broken, ruined human being who's done this to us, at least in this part of their lives. What's my response to them going to be? What is God's response to broken people who go around ruining each other and ruining his world? He forgives. He offers compassion instead of hatred. It's about finding that ounce or milliounce of sorrow and compassion for this broken person who's hurt me. When Peter says, how many times, Jesus? Right? 7 times? Right? What he's showing is that he doesn't get it. He just totally doesn't. For him, forgiveness is like this divinely imposed duty or obligation or something like that. And Jesus is just like, dude, okay, you want to play the numbers game? Let's play the numbers game, Peter. You know, it's sarcasm. That's what 77 times is. He's saying you don't get it. If you're still playing the duty and the tolerating game, and this is just about what God commands me to, then it shows there's a heart issue at work here. Doesn't mean it's easy, it doesn't mean it happens quick, but there's something going on in our hearts. He goes on to spin a little fictional tale, and we won't read it right now. I would encourage you, man, grab a cup of coffee, grab a friend this week, and read and work your way through all of Matthew 18. He ends with a little fictional tale about this guy who refuses to forgive. And he's been forgiven, this huge debt, this guy in the story, but he won't forgive someone who owes him. And so this guy ends up, basically the end of the story, ends up in jail, rotting in prison, being tortured. And Jesus says, yeah, that's how God will let you end up if you don't forgive from your heart. We're like, whoa, that's stiff. You know, what does he mean? When we don't forgive, something turns off inside of us. We're losing a bit of our humanness if we refuse to forgive. He doesn't say if you struggle to forgive, if you find it difficult, if your steps are really small. He says if you refuse, you're closing off a part of you. You're going to end up in slavery. Robert Enright, professor of psychology here at UW, he founded the Institute for Forgiveness Studies. He puts it this way. Victims have every right to the normal, valid response of rage, but those persons who retain a vindictive mindset ultimately give the offender another victim. Embittered, enslaved to the past, their own quality of life can be greatly diminished. However justified, unforgiveness undoes us. anger, hatred, resentment, bitterness, revenge. These are death-dealing spirits. And they eventually end up taking our lives on some level. I believe the only way we can be whole, healthy persons is to learn to forgive. If we refuse to forgive, we're allowing what someone did to us to rule over our lives, to steal your life. And as a Christ follower, we rely on the power and the grace of someone who gives life. God's grace can take the most broken stories and bring something healing. Let's listen to one of those stories right now.
My name is Carolyn Bradway, and this is my story. When I was going to be born, my mother was pregnant. My father was not happy with that, and he did not want the child. I could never please my father. I was never good enough. I didn't have any worth or any value. As I grew up, I lost a lot of the fear for my dad, and I became angry towards him. And I think that was my way of trying to be valued by him. She was saying things like, I always felt the love of the father. And I had no idea. I didn't know she was talking about her father. What father? And then finally it dawned on me. She was talking about God, and she was referring to him as the Father. This was all new to me. I had never heard anybody refer to God the Father in this kind of a way, this loving Father. And I went home that day, and I just remember shouting out, how can I know the love of a father when I have never felt the love of a father? And at that moment, I just felt this incredible love surround me. And from that day forward, my life has changed. I thought, okay, I'm a Christian now. Everything's supposed to get better. You know, I'm a happy Christian. We're happy people. God's supposed to do something, make everything better. And nothing was getting better. In fact, it was probably getting worse. I had a lot of anger issues. I had a lot of issues with rage. I was watching my father out putting feed out for wild animals. And I thought to myself, how in the world could this man, who can be so irritable and so mean, be kind enough to feed animals? And at that moment, the reality of the cross was right in front of me. I remember thinking, you have a choice to make. You can either forgive, or you can continue to go on this path of unforgiveness. And I could just feel this sense of saying, just trust me. And I whispered, I trust you. And I felt such a relief. I felt this, like all the striving was just leaving me. I no longer struggled with the anger or the rage. It just left. And did my relationship with my dad change? Yes, it did change. Not because he changed, but because I changed. My worth was not in this humanness. My worth came from God. He didn't know that I forgave him. I never told him anything. Somehow, he decided to start to get to know me. And I decided to get to know him. It wasn't a close relationship ever, but it was different. And I praise God forevermore for what he has done. It's a beautiful thing.
we forgive, it's an act of trust. We trust that God can take these messes that people throw at us, and as we hand it over to him, when we forgive, we trust that that mess becomes the soil from which new life can be born. It didn't happen quick for Carolyn. It took her years. But she found that there could be life after the bloody, messy wound. This is the gospel. Amen? We recognize this is heavy stuff, man. This hits us square between the eyes and stuff we're dealing with right now in our marriages, our workplace, and our stuff that happened to us a long time ago. So we, again, this week and every week of the series, we are just concluding our services with this sacred, quiet space here in all of the rooms. So if you're watching on video, I'm going to hand you off to your venue pastors now. And here in this room, we've created a few minutes here at the end, end a few minutes early, and we just want to invite anybody who wants to just hang for a while. I'll dismiss everyone in a moment, but if you feel like you just need to stay put, the worship team's just going to play music in the background. There's people praying for you right now, though you may not even know it. If you just want to stay where you're put, just feel free to do that. We also, with every week of the series, we have people from our Blackhawk prayer teams who are in the backs of the rooms. There's 2 back there, there's 2 on the side, and they would love to just pray with you. You know, if you feel like you may not have words, you can share as much or as little, as you like. And let's just not have this weird stigma like prayers for people who are in life crisis or something like this, We all need to pray. We all need to stay put for a while and be quiet. And so let's just give each other that freedom and not have that weirdness in the room as we go. So if you could stand with me for the benediction.